Yeah.
Pick up. Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start that. Luke Chao, welcome to Your Transformation Station. Now, before I let you, God, I feel like I'm monologuing from what we just recorded because of a technical issue, but we want authentic conversations. We want real shit. So, with things going, we want to make sure there's no monologuing. We want to make sure that we understand what is actually being spoken and what
Authenticity is in short supply these days, Greg. And authenticity does sometimes come with so-called imperfections. One thing I often say to my clients is it is better to be authentic and raw than
Mhm.
to be polished and fake. Because, polish often goes with artifice or fakeness. But
Mhm.
authenticity usually comes with a certain degree of imperfection or a certain degree of rawness. But because authenticity is in short supply, it's more appreciated than
Yes.
what's polished and fake.
I gotta say
So,
something real quick. Like
yeah,
the way you sound, like you have a soothing voice, and
thank you.
I believe that definitely has taken a lot of work to make that happen for you.
Well, but part of the reason is you've chosen a very good platform to record on. So obviously, many platforms would take my voice and just compress it into a very tight bandwidth.
Hmm.
Part of it is the recording equipment and everything, but also I've been doing hypnotherapy my entire adult life. So since I was
Wow.
23 years old, now I'm almost 40. I've been doing hypnotherapy, and people kind of they don't become their occupations, but what you think about or how you act most of the week is going to affect how you act when you're not officially at work. So I think part of it is, when I was young, I got compliments on my voice sometimes when I would read poetry in English class or something. So
Hmm.
part of it, I think, it is natural. But part of it, I'm sure, is also I'm used to speaking in a way that communicates effectively, that makes people want to listen, and that helps people to accept the ideas that I put into words. My profession basically is to give people higher quality ways of thinking. But it's not just the words that matter. It's also how you communicate it. It's the way you pick your words. It's how you
Hmm.
speak the words. It's even the equipment for online sessions, which is what I'm mostly doing these days. It's how the voice is picked up and then communicated through the internet.
That's interesting. Now, before we go into this conversation, you have a business. It's called the Morpheus Clinic. So, with your clients, do you offer them the blue pill or the red pill?
Um, so the Matrix is one of the references that the name of my business references. So, uh, but the other references are Morpheus originally was the Greek god of dreams. Um, and
Interesting.
also, Morpheus is the Sandman in Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. And I'm a
Oh.
fan of all three of the above. So The Matrix and Sandman and Greek mythology. So, it's not just The Matrix that the name references, but I would say, if the blue pill is to stay in a fantasy world that feels kind of nice, but that is a fantasy. And if the red pill is to kind of, to open your eyes to reality and to accept reality as it is, without fantasy, without delusion, definitely the second, definitely the red pill. And
Beautiful.
it's because if I am in the business of helping people to be happier and calmer and live higher quality lives, they can't be living in a fantasy. They live in a fantasy, they'll make false predictions about, what happens if they do certain things, or if, false predictions about their capacity for change and that kind of thing. But if you kind of take a close, hard look, not just at what we might call reality, if we take a close, hard look at the reassuring truths and the inspiring truths and the empowering truths, there's plenty there in
Mm.
anyone's life.
Go into that,
to
please.
be empowered by. Sure, absolutely. So many people kind of see hypnotism as putting people into fantasy worlds. And when I started my practice, or actually even before I started my practice, when I was
You're
what?
monologuing. I'm stopping you
What?
right there. I want to hit those truths right there. I want you
Okay,
to go into those.
okay, okay. So I'll skip the backstory.
Thank you.
Um, you're welcome. So one thing I keep saying is that our aliveness matters. That's a truth. That's a reassuring truth. Everyone listening to this is alive, but not everyone listening to this has their aliveness first and foremost on their minds. So, people who are kind of like afraid of flying, they're afraid of, traveling outside their comfort zone. People who are, with various phobias, they are thinking more about dying than living. But dying's a distant, it is going to happen. Like eventually it happens to all of us.
Hmm.
But aliveness is a current, ongoing truth for literally everyone who's listening right now. And
Okay.
it's a very good truth.
Okay. So let me ask you this
For
before
sure.
we
Yeah.
go into the next two truths. With
Yeah.
what you've just spoken, I definitely understand you from looking at it from a psychology perspective. If
Hmm.
if we have arachnophobia, we're afraid of spiders. God, I
Hmm.
used
Yeah.
this already in my previous podcast. I hate that when I
No,
reiterate
no,
something on two
you don't
shows.
have to be so hard on yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's difficult right there. But we'll go into it. All right. So
Yep.
arachnophobia, we're afraid of spiders.
Yep.
What is the root reason behind that? It leads to death.
Right. Yep.
Now, is that that's what you came across with your clientele that you've been seeing with?
Okay, so I'll use arachnophobia as an example because it is an issue that comes up. It's a fear that many of my former clients have had. And in some parts of the world, you're right. In some parts of the world, if one's completely careless about which spiders they hold and pet, they could get poisoned and die. That is true. I think the root of a fear like this is not necessarily like in our environment or the way we're brought up. I think there's sort of something instinctual about being creeped out by spiders. But we kind of grew. Humanity evolved in more tropical climates, not
Hmm.
like outside my window. There's snow everywhere because I'm in Toronto, Canada. And there's
Nice.
literally no chance I'm going to get bitten by a venomous spider walking around, local parks and ravines and so on.
Hmm.
So, a reassuring truth that I would say to any of my clients who at least are living in Toronto is that you can feel perfectly safe walking through parks and forests, going up to your cabin, going to the cottage, in a place like this, that the fear is disproportionate with the threat, that your body misperceives threats where actually there are none. Now, if I were
Hmm.
talking to someone, so I've had a client, for example, who was moving to Mexico and has arachnophobia.
Sure.
And so, in a situation where a client might actually come face to face with like a brown recluse or a black widow spider,
God, I fucking hate
um,
those.
the message is similar because most spiders are still going to be harmless, but with the addition of the message that you'll learn to identify the dangerous spiders. Fear's never a helpful reaction. You are better protected through clear identification of the animal you're dealing with. So you'll know what the venomous spiders in your area look like. You will keep a distance from them. You don't have to be afraid during any of it. And most spiders you encounter are going to be harmless.
Now
So
let me pause. You're a monologuer. I'm gonna hold you down.
I'm in the business of talking.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. But we're gonna get some gold out of this. You have a lot of insight. Now let me ask you. Let's get off the spiders and let's look at, oh man, millennial population. I'm one of them.
Mhm.
We have a lot of trauma. Now let me
Yeah.
let me preface where I want to take this. Okay, with Your Transformation Station, we are looking at culture, we're looking at organizational ethics, we're looking at leadership, but we're also looking at human behavior and psychology. Now,
Yep.
we as millennials have experienced different forms of being raised.
Mhm.
Now, I feel like there's some things in our past that still haunt us, that we don't have clarity on
Yep.
what is actually bothering us, and we sometimes will try to grasp onto something that will help us understand what actually is holding us back.
Right. Got it. So I am an older millennial. I was born in the early 80s. So I do count myself as a millennial. I'm kind of a digital native. And usually the culture war that's talked about is millennials versus boomers. And in that context, obviously, values and societal mores change over
Mhm.
time. And what is normal in the 21st century is not what was normal in the middle part of the last century when many of our parents were born, or even the latter part of the last century when many of our parents grew up. So, one thing I've got to say to you and to your millennial listeners, or even like the next generation, is that by the time you become an adult, right? In the eyes of the world, you're fundamentally an equal to your parents and people who used to be your teachers and the other adults. Like we all get one vote at election time, right? So boomers don't get any extra votes because they're boomers. Millennials do get a vote because now they're of adult age. So there's so much I want to say about this, but I'm going
Yeah,
to try not to monologue, as you put it.
appreciate it.
One point I want to make is that we all have ethics and morals and values. At least I hope we all have morals and ethics. At least we have our own code
They should
that
be
we
instilled at
live
least.
by.
Yes.
Yeah. But even like in the absence of what you might call a moral education, one can turn to his or her own heart to connect with what he or she feels to be good. Like,
Hmm.
if everyone believed in this principle, then the world would be a better place. I think we can all introspect in that way and connect with our own conscience, which is an interesting word because I used to hear it a lot growing up. I don't hear the word conscience get used really all that much any longer. Don't know if it's just me or if it's broadly, but what I'm saying is most people have a conscience. Most people have an inner moral compass. And it's only when you were a child that you had to push aside your own and listen to your parents or your teachers. Now you're an adult. That's a matter of fact. And as an adult, your morality is well informed. Your conscience is a mature conscience. If you still disagree with, say, your parents in some ways today, so say they're homophobic or racist or whatever, and you think they're just completely wrong,
Hmm.
well, you have a 21st century morality that was informed by more recent years than, say, a homophobic or bigoted or racist
Hmm.
worldview, I'll call it.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, so in some ways, younger people have it right. And in some ways, older people are kind of obviously it's not everyone, but what I'm saying is we don't have to defer to elders because they're older. I'm saying that because society changes so quickly, decade by decade, younger people have a more up to date
Yes.
worldview.
Well, see, what I'm right now, I feel like it's changing much faster than that. Right
Mhm.
now, with what we're dealing with, is we are looking into the metaverse. We are
Right.
looking at our own perceptions that we are facing at our own home office as we try to
Mhm.
communicate with other people through the screen on the other side, through podcast,
Yeah.
whatever we want to
It,
do, Tinder. But
yeah.
hold that thought there. Now, with how I don't see us getting what we need from what has already been given to us. by our elders, by our parents, by our mentors. I feel like
Mhm.
there's a certain point where we have to move off and address things in our own way, using our own unique identity, and pioneer innovation in the workplace, in life, and in the issues that we all are dealing with, because
Mhm.
now they are affecting the system as a whole.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to understand is with
You're
ethic.
talking about leadership.
Yes.
To
Yes.
turn inwardly to our own inner compass, to our own values and ethics, and to boldly go where older generations did not go, is
Yes.
leadership. And it's a good thing. It's something that benefits everyone when sometimes people step up and demonstrate leadership. Because if you only listen to prior generations, teachers, parents, mentors, and so on, you're a follower. One of the big distinctions between a leader and a follower is a follower turns to others for advice or guidance or validation, and a leader turns within him or herself
Now, whoa,
for
whoa.
guidance.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hate to be the dude that cuts you off. We'll get the rhythm right. What comes first? Is it the follower or the leader?
I would say that we all, growing up, we have to kind of learn what is and follow the leadership of those who have come before us. We all kind of go through the first 18, 21, 25 years of our life where we are following, where we do consume more than we produce, where we kind of are influenced by those who influence us. But by the time we're 18, 21, 25, you can pick a number. We are adults. We can create our own thoughts and ideas and opinions or podcasts and books and so on from our own hearts, from our own minds, from our own inner worlds. And we don't just have to consume other people's thoughts or opinions. So I would, for sure, you can't have a baby producing brilliant architecture. They have to understand through the first many years of their life, what has come before them and how it's sort of done. But once they become an adult and once their career reaches a certain point, they're going to break the boundaries. They're going to push forward and invent new styles. And that I would suggest is the normal and healthy progression
Beautiful.
of a
Beautiful.
person.
I love
Yeah.
that. I don't want to beat it anymore. That Let's leave it as it
Mhm.
is right there. Now, you present yourself as a more practical driven hypnotist.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I think I was starting to say I don't really put people in fantasy worlds, and
Mhm.
instead I kind of ground people in the reassuring truths. I mean, it's a truth that pretty much everyone, or at least most people listening to this, is an adult. If they're over 18, they can vote, they can serve in the military, they can serve their country. They're an
Oh,
adult. Full stop. So they do. It's not to rise above their station to recognize that they have a morality that counts. They don't have to exclude themselves from the other adults. They don't have to sit at the kid table any longer. They can sort of hold their own at least increasingly over time against the other adults in the world. And this is good because many of the ways that people are kind of traumatized, just to kind of loop back to one of the
oh,
topics you had brought up,
okay.
is that they have a sense of what's right, what's good, how the world ought to work. And then that is terribly violated. So it's not just, say, the car accident. It's not just, a war atrocity that they witness. It's
Mhm.
also their sense of morality is violated,
Now,
right?
see, I agree 100%, but do you think it almost is adapted to a higher level of thinking to avoid those situations from ever happening again?
Um, yes, and no. I can see the adaptivity. I can see also how it's maladaptive.
Hmm.
So I can kind of see it from both perspectives, where it is true if you're terrified of spiders, you might never leave your home and never encounter a spider, and you just spray Raid all over your home
Hmm.
so that you never have to face a spider. I mean, in that sense, a fear of spiders prevents you from ever being bitten by a spider.
Hmm.
But that's a fairly limited way to see it. If you kind of step back, then it's maladaptive to stay in your home and spray every crevice with Raid whenever you have a chance.
Okay.
So,
PTSD with being
yeah, yeah,
involved in a serious situation where death has occurred in front of somebody's eyes. Now,
yeah,
you said no at the very last part. I really want to touch that first before I go any further. Do you
sure.
do you think that we find ourselves in these situations again because we are almost testing ourselves to overcome the situation that we didn't overcome initially?
Possibly. I mean, I can't kind of speculate on a hypothetical person. Again, whenever we talk about a group of, say, a few million people around the world, or
Mm.
even like a billion people, we can't. I can't really give one pat answer. In some cases, yes. In some cases, it does cause avoidance. I think avoidance more typically characterizes PTSD, whereas someone who is intentionally exposing themselves to a situation where they could be triggered, or they could come face to face with what they had been afraid of, that requires effort. That's a conscious act in defiance of a fear
Now,
that
do
they
you
have.
do you help your clientele with being a hypnotist? Do you help them face their fears? Like if
Mhm.
it comes down to I don't want to go into weight loss or
Yeah,
trying to feel positive about
yeah, yeah.
something that is much more serious than what's really going on. But
Mhm.
do you reintroduce them into the fear? Like tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, for me, the goal that, or the objective I have for my client, is acceptance of whatever truths will benefit them. So I'll use death or dying as an example, because throughout our lives, we are all confronted with death and dying. If everything happens in a natural order, we're going to watch our parents pass. It will be abnormal to kind of go through a lifetime and then no one you're close to dies. So
Yes.
we all at some point have to kind of come face to face with death. And over the past couple years, I don't know whether it's because of COVID or something else, but I have worked with quite a number of clients to help them with their fear of death and dying. And there is a book I read called Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. It won a Pulitzer Prize in 1974. Um, and it's basically, you can stop me if I'm monologuing too much, but Becker kind of contradicts Freud, because Freud identified repressed sexuality as the cause of all neurosis.
Yes.
Becker identifies denial of death, repression of death and dying, as the cause of neurosis, but also the cause of much art and religion and other human rituals. So it's a very interesting
Yeah.
philosophical book on how our fear of death drives so much of culture, and so much, like, people will build monuments and write all their thoughts into a book before they die, and they'll have children to kind of cope with the terror of our eventual morality. But then we have, say, the Stoic philosophers, who used memento mori, remember that you too will die, as almost a comforting thought, because the fact that we'll all eventually die means that we can live more fully once we recognize our aliveness, which is a point I had made earlier.
Yes.
So I think that the philosophy of memento mori, remember that we'll die, and um, I guess the unspoken corollary is remember you're still alive. That is a healthier attitude than attitudes that would have you deny or repress your own mortality. So um, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, no, you killed it. Like you literally beat the shit out of it and it's bleeding out on the floor.
Thank you.
That is fantastic. Let's rewind a little bit. We addressed one truth. We still have two more to go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't really have a list of three truths, so I guess I'll have to think of one.
No, yeah, you definitely mentioned there's three that allowed us to see, to recognize what's actually happening in front of us.
Yeah, it may have been an offhand thought, not necessarily one I've kind of thought out. I mean, I would say that in everything I do, I kind of bring people to some reassuring truths, and the short list of truths I'll point out will differ depending on the client. So if I have, say, like a weight loss client, the list of truths I'll convey to them is going to be different than if I have a client who is afraid of their eventual mortality. I mean, I have had a couple of clients in this past year who literally had cancer, and one of them did pass. But even someone in the final months of their life is still a conscious human being. Their quality of life will still be improved if they keep their mind on certain things. Their quality of life will still be diminished if they put their mind on other things. As long as one has aliveness and consciousness, as long as one's a breathing human being, there's always something to be said for groundedness in the reassuring truths. I mean, many people who are about to pass, they kind of make peace with their mortality, and they're not scared of it any longer. Okay. And that's a wonderful place to be.
Yes. No. So what I'm understanding is we are reducing, just eliminating the emotion, the driver that is affecting us on living our life fully, whether it's something negative or if it's something positive, being actually afraid of success or something that's historic that is still bothering us to this day.
Yeah, I look for sort of the misconceptions. So wherever the client thinks differently from someone with a good, healthy, grounded perspective, but who's in the same situation, I'll borrow from that healthy thinking client or that healthy thinking person their worldview to communicate to my client. So, if you give me a specific example, I can sort of put this abstract idea into specifics.
Before we do that, can you tell me, was there a common theme that you've came across with your clients that stand out, that will help us recognize and address it?
So the one point I write into all of my treatment plans, every single one, is that the mind-body link is very real. And I'll expand upon that. So the thoughts you hold in your head and heart are going to be affecting your body one way or another. If you think of your physical body as a perfect listener, so that, whatever you're thinking in your head is going to affect your body, then you have almost an obligation to speak kindly to yourself inside your own head. For the same reason that if you have a child, like you have a son, right?
Yes.
So your son's kind of just absorbing everything around him. And there are no perfect parents, so you don't have to reach perfection as a parent. But he is going to be absorbing and listening. And that gives you an obligation to pick your words so that you're speaking the kinder thoughts, so that he has good influences, so that he grows up with a worldview that maybe you didn't have just handed to you, but that will benefit him if you just kind of hand to him a worldview that is going to benefit him. So we kind of recognize this obligation to children, that they're such good listeners, we must be careful about what we say to them. And then there are some things we just would never say to them because we recognize those thoughts as harmful.
Now, what do you mean by harmful thoughts? Because I'm fathering a newborn, of course. 6 months. He's no longer newborn.
Oh, okay.
I got to stop that. And stepdaughter, I tell her my 100% what I believe in about everything. I hold nothing back. Now,
Yeah.
is that wrong? I mean, we could go down that. That's a sticky road. But
I don't know what you're saying to them, so I can't really give you an answer. But so to answer the question of what constitutes a harmful thought,
yes.
it's a thought that might limit someone, that might keep someone as a follower rather than let them become a leader. It's a thought that would cause unnecessary suffering. It's a thought that might make people more anxious or fearful than they have to be because it gives them a worldview that the world is fundamentally dangerous or people are fundamentally bad. And it's sort of philosophical discussion. But generally, I would identify helpful thoughts as ones that lead to a happier life,
Yes. Yeah,
and harmful thoughts as ones that would diminish quality of life.
I like that. And this is it can ripple out not into just parenting your children, but also being a leader in an organization and how you view your team and how you approach them. What I'm picking up from you is you don't have to be a dick if the situation doesn't permit it. I mean, we all know the common theme and the mission and what is expected of us as the workforce as well as management. So what you're saying is we have to, I don't want to say pick and choose your battles. I want to say view the system and see what it is lacking and communicate to both sides, corporate and to your workforce, and bring everybody on a common picture.
Well, I think we're all familiar with the idea that people are motivated much better through praise and encouragement than through criticism or anything that would be harsh. We understand
Unnecessary criticism. Unnecessary.
like non-constructive criticism. So we're all sort of familiar with the idea that if we're training a dog or a cat or a horse, we give positive reinforcement to encourage what we want to see them do more of.
Operant conditioning,
And
yes.
yep, and it's unnecessary to kind of inflict punishment, because rewarding the good, rewarding what you want to see is enough. So we kind of apply this to employees as well, where we'll give more constructive, positive, helpful feedback than we would, just kind of destructive or overly critical feedback. But the point I want to loop back to is that when you talk to yourself inside your head and your body's a perfect listener, it gives you the obligation to speak to yourself as you would anyone else you care about. So whether it's an employee who you're mentoring or a child you're raising or even a pet dog or horse you're training, you have an obligation to yourself in the same way you have an obligation to others. They don't teach you this in kindergarten. Like, they teach you to be nice to others.
Mm-hmm.
They don't teach you to talk to yourself as kindly to others. The false idea, I think, is that people believe that if they're kind to themselves, it makes them selfish or that it makes them arrogant.
Quite
But
the contrary.
that's exactly. It's not like, people who are hard on others, they have similar dialogue going on inside their heads. But where kindness flows freely to everybody. So that's why I'm saying that you have almost an obligation, almost a moral obligation to speak to yourself kindly and be in sort of that supportive, kind, encouraging mindset, because it's going to be reflected in then your relationships to others, whether family or friends or employees.
Yes.
That having one standard, the same standard you apply for others, is really good for you too.
Yes.
There's no need to be overly hard on yourself because positive encouragement is enough. And people don't give this to themselves, which is why I keep having to say it.
I agree. And what I want to illustrate and caveat on what you just said is with you beating yourself up in front of employees, in front of your children, just the way you act, that's being picked up by the people that look up to you. So if it's a comment that you say that was unnecessary, it's the clothing that you're wearing, it's the attitude that you have about doing something that's a responsibility, that is what you're illustrating, and that is what you're teaching, and that is fucked up.
And usually we pick it up from those we look up to when we're younger. This is sort of how generational cycles of trauma happen. But each person is not a robot or a machine. We're not like animals that can be easily trained. Each person can decide, it does require introspection and work, but each person can decide they will live in accordance with what they believe to be right and good. And they can decide to disagree with their parents. They can decide their parents were so absolutely wrong about the matters that were harmful, the matters that, no longer jive. So that they don't pass on trauma to the next generation.
I agree. I mean, unless you want to join the military, you'll fucking adapt real quick and learn through their philosophy. But let's move on. What's the most interesting request you've received in your line of work?
Ooh. Well, I do have to maintain confidentiality. I have a feeling like the most interesting requests are also unique and individual enough they might identify individuals. And many of the most interesting requests I actually will turn down because they're asking me to do things that I can't really do, or at least not with the tools I have.
Oh,
So
God, I really want to know.
Well, I'm in the business of kind of giving people new ways to think, right? So anything that is going to benefit from a new way of thinking, anything that benefits from a change in perspective or attitude, I can probably help with. But then I'll get requests for, say, curing of physical illnesses, bringing an ex back, almost like they want me to do voodoo magic. That's where I have to turn them down because it doesn't matter how differently they think about it. They need a doctor for their, physical illness, and they need better communication and relationships if they want their ex back at all. So, yeah, I would say the most interesting cases, at least to me, are the unusual ones. But it's not unusual for someone to do a couple sessions so that they listen for a few hours and then they're done with tobacco. Or it's not unusual for someone to kind of listen for a couple of hours and whatever fear that they thought was just unique to them, it just doesn't make sense anymore. And they're kind of in the same grounded worldview that most of us have. A few hours of listening actually can do a lot for a lot of people. This is something that not everyone recognizes. You have to have good, helpful things to listen to, but you don't necessarily have to kind of talk out your problems all the time. You don't necessarily have to kind of just live with your problems. A few hours of concentrated listening can be enough to make a big difference in your perspectives or worldview.
Yeah,
You don't
just
have to
like
live
listening
with
to this podcast right here.
That's why I'm here.
Yes.
I don't have to formally hypnotize people. I don't have to charge money to people in order for them to benefit from good ideas that they can adopt as their own.
I really like that. Now, with that advice, what could you give? I really want to get some personal questions, and then we will shoot right to everything about you and what you want to talk about, just like I promised you.
Sure.
So what type of advice would you give an individual who's taken on a leadership role for the first time?
Great question, because I'll see a lot of people, often in the context of public speaking and the fear of public speaking, because leaders will be asked to lead groups. Followers are rarely asked to take the microphone and lead a few hundred people. So one thing that it's
I'm
true.
I'm going to challenge you on that here in a moment. You say
Okay.
what you got to say. I'm challenging you.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing I would say to new leaders is because you're no longer a follower, because you've risen to a leadership role, you have to become your own biggest source of encouragement and positivity and verbal support because there's like no one above you to give you these things. So when you're growing up as a child, when you're an adolescent, when you're a junior employee, there's always someone above you to say, hey, good work. Well done. Keep that up. Let's see more of that. And you felt good, right? You would feel like a
No,
nice,
no,
warm,
that was
fuzzy feeling.
cheesy and bullshit. It's like this dude's an ass.
So, but once you become a leader, it's like everyone feels like it's not their place to tell you you've done a great job. It's like who tells the president of the United States they've done a great job? Who tells Elon Musk they've done a great job? I mean, it's like President Biden. It's Elon Musk. Of course, I
I
won't
mean,
say it to them.
his bank account says he's done a great job.
Yeah, but he has to like look at it and recognize that that in itself is validation. That in itself means
right.
he's done a great job.
Yes.
But not everyone will look at their bank account and see it as, as like a good thing or validation of work well done. So one has to, inside his own head, speak to himself the way that a good leader or manager might speak to them. And professional athletes, for example, have to do this. So they can't wait for the crowd to cheer before they score the goal. They have to tell themselves inside their own heads that they can do it, they've got this, they can win this. Then they score the goal, then the crowd cheers. And that's why professional athletes are leaders.
Okay, I want to hold it because you got two things for me there.
You want to challenge me?
Yes, let's go back to that. Okay, followers afraid to step up to the plate and have that confidence to think that they can do it. That was me as a younger individual. I was that individual that did not receive the guidance, that actually had to sort it out from everybody and just listen and just keep my mouth shut and just observe. And I observed through indirect interaction and use of my own ability to be aware of my body and aware of my thoughts constantly. Now, there's a certain point where I've seen enough of where it's being repetitive, and it's like, why are people still viewing this lens that is no longer applicable in today's society? I feel like it's my turn to say something because I have a unique perspective. I spent 20 years with my mouth shut observing, and I feel like we need a new view. Otherwise, we're going to repeat history. It's a bunch of nonsense. We don't need to go out there. And now here I am. I am that introvert. I am that individual that was afraid to speak. But the way I see it, I embrace my vulnerabilities by being me, by being a perceived dick, when really I just want people to understand, hey, these are relevant questions. Why haven't you considered these questions? And then you want to argue it, but then it's like, are you really arguing me? Or are you arguing the possibility that it's time for you to realign yourself and start listening, that you can't be one or the other. You can't be you have to be both. You have to be it's consecutive, it's continuous. And then let's go to I was going ham on that, then I forgot the second one where I wanted to go with it.
But I'll answer that point, because you basically, for lack of a better term, this has to be in quotes, you grew up when you stopped following and just obeying ideas you disagreed with. And you took the mic yourself to speak, to lead, to put what you thought were better ideas out in the public sphere. And earlier I said that this transition from follower to leader is a normal, healthy progression for a person, that first one to be, say, 40 or 50 years old and only just turning to other people for opinions is honestly kind of pathetic. I don't mean that like in an abusive way. I just mean that someone who's become an adult can do much better than to always turn to others for validation or always turn to others for opinions. So, yeah, that story illustrated the point perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
It's a healthy progression to not just put up, not just stay quiet, but to actually show leadership where leadership is lacking.
Yes, I would say open up versus grow up, and I agree with you with just viewing life as it's time to adjust. It's time to move forward. And Oh man, I'm trying to pull this out of my ass, and I can't get to that part where you left me. I wanted to talk about that. What was that?
It's a good conversation anyway.
Yes, it
Well,
is. I love it.
I want to point out that there's one of you saying the kinds of things you do, and then a whole bunch of listeners following your thoughts. And I'm hoping that in the future, many of them would, start a podcast or start a blog or, otherwise demonstrate leadership, or even in their own organizations or workplaces to kind of step up where there's a leadership vacuum or like a moral vacuum or whatever else is missing.
Hell yeah.
Um, but there are more followers than leaders. This is why leaders are so appreciated. It's easy to follow. It's easy to turn to others for opinions or guidance. It's harder to follow. So it's harder to lead. It's harder to be vulnerable, to put your thoughts out there, to kind of be in the spotlight. But it's necessary for some percentage of the population to show leadership, especially where leadership is lacking.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I see a lot of people stepping up and saying shit that doesn't make sense, that doesn't go in line with their character. It's like you want authentic leadership, but then they can't embrace their own problems. When I am very intuitive and I can just see trauma all over them, and it's like, dude, why haven't you addressed that shit first before you're telling me to fix my life?
To me, it isn't leadership when you ask someone else to go before you. So if you haven't done something, but you tell someone else to go do it, that's not leadership, right?
No,
leadership.
That's an asshole.
It's when you go first. So this kind of ties in with authenticity. You're being unhypocritical if you tell people, like I'm telling people, I would love to see, people share more cool ideas in the blogosphere and the podcast sphere, but I'm also kind of going first. Like I'm also putting myself out there and sharing ideas, and without a script and with someone who's holding me to task if I monologue or if I BS.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the world benefits from people filling in gaps and voids in ethics or vision or, what we perceive to be lacking. So I think that's why leadership is so talked about, like in school, and it's so talked about in, at least like good families. We talk about leaders of tomorrow, leaders of the future. It's because the whole world benefits, but only if they've gone first and they're not hypocritical and they're not telling people to do things they haven't done themselves.
Yes, and I get it. I get the process. It's a developmental role. The way I see it, I mean, this is just anecdotal direction that I'll provide. It's you really can't be a leader if you haven't gone through the trenches first and took the time to learn yourself through everything. In my interactions with potential podcast recordings, those that didn't make it on Your Transformation Station, they didn't go through and understand what operates them. What values do they take? What values do they stand up for? What character traits matter to them most? All of these things that make a human being at its most peak performance level, you have to go through that and understand it and know it like it's on the back of your hand, no matter what, because you're going to be tested through every situation, and you cannot prepare for what life has in store. The best way to do it is know you and what you can handle, and challenge yourself and step out there and say you can do it, because that's what really matters.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah. I just want to go ham on this thing right now. So that was fantastic. But now with hypnotism, yes, in my psychology classes, in my college days, well, in-person college days, now it's remote, my instructor did not believe in hypnotism. He completely told me it was garbage. It's horse shit.
Mhm.
Don't believe it. It's nothing. You can bring that up out of yourself through being consistent and consecutive and just make
Mhm.
your own identity by your own belief system. Now,
Mhm.
what do you have to say to him?
Great question. So, if he's listening, um, I would first ask, do you think I spoke a single line of bullshit during this interview, during this unscripted interview? Do you think I'm misleading people into a false perception of the world? Do I um, match that stereotype of a hypnotist that you had inside your head? And probably not. Now, there are different ways to do hypnotism. Earlier, I said that I made the choice not to put people in fantasy worlds and to kind of ground people in whatever the reassuring truths might be in their situation.
I love that.
That was a conscious choice. I didn't have to go that route. I could, have people flying through waterfalls and feeling like they're a beautiful dolphin, freely, playing inside the ocean. There is that style of hypnotism. It's not what I practice. It's not what hypnosis has to be. And I also don't think it serves people as much as grounding in the truth. And again, I'll point out if someone who's dying of cancer can accept the truth that they have a limited time on the planet and still find beauty and love during their remaining time on planet Earth, then whatever situation your listeners might be in, they can also find the reassuring truths and the inspiring truths and the life affirming truths, but they've got to look. That's the important thing. Not everyone goes and looks for the inspiring truths or the reassuring truths or the empowering truths.
Yes, there
But
it is. Those are the three. All right.
oh yeah, that's just like off the top of my head. But yeah, so like, so now I can answer the question that I didn't really completely understand when you asked it earlier. So an example of a reassuring truth is that you are still alive, you still have a tomorrow, most likely you still have a next month and a next year. That's a pretty reassuring truth. Um, an inspiring truth might be, I don't know, everyone has their own heroes. And often we look up to our heroes because they've gone through similar adversity or some even a worse adversity, and they kept their heads up high and they maintained their dignity and they never lost their humanity, even though some do. So, any of our heroes, when we read their biographies, we read a lot of inspiring truths that point to what's possible for a human being. Empowering truths. To give you an example, for the fear of public speaking, by the time you're asked to speak as an adult, usually you really do have something to say, and usually you know more about it than pretty much everyone in the audience. So you're legitimately in a leadership role if you're asked to speak to a group as an adult. So those are some examples of the types of truths that I want to keep my eye on and that I want my clients to also fully accept and embrace.
Wow. Like that. That is
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
that also answers your college professor and sort of his mistaken view of hypnotists, because what it sounds like he believes is quite different from what I actually do. Um, it is a powerful tool. Hypnotism can be kind of used to have people believe in things that aren't true. But people will join cults without hypnotism. People will believe in all sorts of schemes without hypnotism. So the fact that hypnotism can sometimes be used to get people to believe lies, to me, doesn't mean anything about hypnotism and everything about the person who's practicing it.
Yes. Yes. The power of framing and priming the brain to go into a state of
Yep.
another world. But
And suggestion.
yes, thank you.
Power of suggestion.
That's yes. Thank you so much for taking the words right out of my mouth. Now I have one more question, and then I want to
Sure.
highlight your practice, and we can go into that. Now,
Sure.
for our listeners, what is some actionable advice they can extract from this next words that come out of your mouth. What?
Yeah. Well, I'll reference some earlier words that have come out of my mouth. And one big takeaway that I think your listeners can might have is that mind over matter is a real phenomenon. The mind-body link is real, and the inner dialogue you have in your head and heart is going to be heard by your body. Which means if you speak to yourself like a friend and your body's listening, your body's going to feel kind of befriended. But if you speak to yourself like your worst enemy, your body's going to feel the hostility and it's going to be on edge, and unnecessarily, because you do have a lot of say in what you say to yourself. I mean, my entire job is to give people helpful thoughts to keep in their heads and hearts so their body is hearing what's truthful, and if the truth is they can relax. If the truth is nothing terrible is going to happen, then their body relaxing is a correct perception of their current circumstances. So a huge takeaway is the mind-body link is real. We have to recognize this. A lot of the suffering that people go through, it's because of the way they talk to themselves. I mean, like if you're married to someone and you only speak harshly to them, it's not going to be a good marriage. They're not going to be happy.
I speak harshly to myself, and that's what I've trained myself to be like. I use that as fire to motivate me.
And even though it's familiar and it has some upside, I would suggest that not every high achieving person talks to themselves the way you talk to yourself. It's possible for you to achieve your goals without being as hard on yourself, just like it's possible for a friend or a child to achieve their goals without too much criticism and only positive reinforcement. So the huge takeaway is to be mindful about how you talk to yourself, because you have zero obligation to be hard on yourself. In fact, if you uphold the same standard by which you'll speak to a friend inside your own head, that's a very good standard for self-talk. So if there's something you would never say to a friend, like I don't know if you're like ex-military.
Yes, I am. The shaved head right there.
On that earlier, but also sort of like the ways you talked about the military. So obviously, like there's a different culture in the military where you don't speak too kindly and gently.
Well, I feel like that's the perceived understanding from the outside of the customs and courtesies. It's more direct, right to the point. No, like this is what needs to be done because we're under pressure. And people that don't experience that view that as negative. When I feel like that is, holy shit, like you saved me about 20 minutes of a conversation by telling me to do this. And it only took you 10 seconds. But I want to go back to the mind body before I forget, because you brought it back to me. What I completely agree, like 100%. I want to illustrate that when I let my hair grow out. So once that happened, I started to get lazy. It was kind of just happening in a weird way where it's like I'm not doing the things that I used to do. I used to do a morning routine where I would journal. Do all this great stuff that really satisfied me. But then I started I decided to shave my head. And then that brought back a side of me that I've experienced when I was active duty. And now here I am watching the clock, doing the things that I need to do, making sure this shit's getting done one way or another. I don't care. That is occurring automatically. And I get it with the putting the uniform on. And that helps us go back to the identity that we made. But even just altering something on your body, it brings you right back.
Well, it's interesting how hair is symbolic. And I know this is like an auditory podcast, so your listeners can't see, but I haven't had a haircut in quite some time. The pandemic basically forced the government to shut down the barbershops in Toronto. So I'm like, screw it. Our premier and our mayor are growing their hair out as a show of solidarity to their constituents. It's going to be a new fashion. So I started growing out my hair just because I couldn't get a haircut legally. There were underground barbers. Anyway, but there is an association between longer hair and creativity.
Yes.
Being a free thinker, being a philosopher, being an artist, being a bohemian. And there is sort of an association between short hair and being a businessman, or being military, or being a monk, or being, in some kind of highly regimented role.
Mhm.
I don't really. It's an observation. I don't know why there seems to be such symbolism in hair, but it's not just you. It seems to be that, like, I know when I used to get more frequent haircuts, that I would feel a little bit sharper. I would feel like a little bit like I would choose the more business-like clothing from my closet
Mm.
after a haircut. So it's interesting how symbolism kind of affects our thinking and our behaviors. But yeah, it's definitely not just you.
Oof, I've hit on this before, and I'll just bring it back in just a hair. Doing these little habits, the haircut, obviously brushing your teeth, flossing, even if you have to floss a fucking tooth just to get a habit going, that all intersects into taking accountability. And I feel like accountability is linked to something that requires, I don't want to just use physical labor. I don't want to use a 12-hour shift. First off, I want to just thank all of our selfless service individuals out there. I appreciate your service, military, firefighters, police, everybody, Secret Service, all of you guys. I love what you do. I'm a veteran and I appreciate you. Somebody has to take the torch on. But going back to this, it those little habits integrate. And now, when you said with long hair and creativity, you're damn right. Because I was letting my hair grow and I was doing graphics and shit. And it's just like you're not focusing on moving around. You're letting your brain grow versus your body.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. You did correctly recognize that I know very little about the military. It's I live in a big city. I'm in Canada. We're famous for being peacekeepers. We're not famous for invading different countries. So you're right. I do know very very little about it. But to kind of generalize more broadly, um, there is truth in the idea that how you do the little things reflects also how you kind of do the big things. And the little things are not necessarily trivial or unimportant, because if you're kind of on top of the little things, like flossing your teeth, you're probably also on top of the big things, like running your business. So, yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yes. And then if you're doing those little things, when when do we decide that our internal dialogue has gone too far? When we are overdoing it and we are not actually applying our attention to other places that should be applied to.
I'm not sure there are like very definitive standards, but I will say that I believe each person is the best person to decide for themselves. So rather than me or you or like someone's spouse, if someone looks at how they spent a day and they realize they spent way too much time polishing their shoes and not enough time, you know, working on their business, they can self-assess that the next day they had to change their priorities. I don't think any outside authority needs to kind of come in to say that's too much time polishing your shoes, not enough time working on your business. That, one can, as long as one's looking, as long as you're looking at how you've spent your day, then you can recognize when you're wasting time on the unimportant things and not leaving enough time for the important things.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want a business that's running, I mean, you better put the fucking shoes down and address what needs to be addressed right now.
Mhm.
But now tell us about your establishment and where can we learn more and anything that you haven't told our audience you would like to share with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are several places your listeners can find out more about me and the way I think, especially about hypnosis. And probably the best place is my YouTube channel, Morpheus Hypnosis.
Oh, that's
There's
nice.
some free sample sessions. There's a crash course in how to hypnotize your friends for fairly lighthearted purposes. There's episodes of a podcast I tried to launch. There were only 10 episodes, but you can hear my thoughts about hypnosis. There's also a Watch Me Work series where, for the 15th anniversary of the founding of my office, I live streamed some online sessions, of course, with the consent of the participant, and unedited, unscripted, with issues the client would kind of present to me. You can watch me work. It's a pretty
cool.
accurate representation of what my clients are actually paying me for behind closed doors. So the YouTube channel is probably the best place to find out more about me. I mentioned my podcast. It's now been quite some time since I've updated it, but it's called The Hypnosis Nerd. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on iTunes and Google Podcasts. If you do want to work with me individually, you can reach out to the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis at morpheusclinic.com. We have an initial consultation process. I do written treatment plans. But I hope that even just listening to this episode, that your listeners have gotten a lot out of it when it comes to ways of thinking that are worth keeping, and also ways of thinking that are worth revisiting or discarding.
Yes, I know my ADD can be very overwhelming to people I interview. So I do appreciate you maintaining your composure through our social interaction.
No, I love it. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. I will link everything in the show notes. I just want to share this real quick before I let you go. When we started recording initially, the way you speak, you already were putting me in a trance, because I was like, holy shit, like this dude is legit. Like we're just talking and I'm like, okay.
But the intent is not to hypnotize people. So maybe we need a warning at the start of the podcast saying don't listen while you're driving or operating machinery. But the intent is not to put people into a trance through any kind of technique. My intent is to speak as clearly and impactfully and truthfully at the same time. And I think if you kind of look at really good communicators, like people who have audiences or people we want to listen to, like presidents, for example, you will hear that they're speaking. I forgot the adjectives I used, but they're speaking truthfully for sure, and they're speaking impactfully, and they're speaking clearly. So even without any intent to hypnotize someone, I think that sincere, clear, truthful, authentic communication is going to be listened to one way or another.
Well, I don't know if the president's being truthful, but we'll leave that up.
I'm thinking more about, the entire history of the United States and not necessarily more recent years. But
Jake, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an honor to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
And then we'll cut it right there.
Cool.
Jake.
Cool. Yeah, it's actually Luke. Oh, my name's Luke.
Oh my
not
God.
We could redo that part if you want to.
Jesus. I'm not gonna lie. I have not slept, so you were putting me in a trance like hardcore. Like that's why I'm chugging like energy drinks to wake me up. My face is red.
Not even intentionally, but also like I meant what I said when I said that I'm not even trying to hypnotize you or anyone, but anyone who speaks to you very sincerely and helpfully, you're going to want to tune into to the exclusion of anything else that could be happening around you.
Yes.
So I think a hypnotist has an obligation to be sincere and truthful and authentic, because it comes with the territory of being listened to. I know if I felt like I was telling a lie, it's not going to sound trancy. Like
yes.
If I was saying something I don't believe in, it's going to sound insincere, and you're not going to listen. You're not going to trance out. But so I think just to kind of like put first things first, people trancing out is just a side effect of me speaking as.
I want to cover that, but let me fix this mistake before I forget.
Sure.
Luke, I appreciate you coming on the show today. It really meant a lot for me.
Thank you for having me.
You take care. Now, Please, okay, tell me how you gotten so good at speaking. Like public speaking was my biggest fear, and now I feel like I'm a kid that just kind of trances around. I'm 30 years old, and I just feel like I trance it around, not just showing off when I could be so much better. And hearing you talk, I idolize that. Like that is fucking cool.
And it's definitely not an a built-in ability. It's
It's
so
learned.
obviously. So I wasn't even born speaking English. I grew up for my first few years overseas. Um, but to answer the question as succinctly as I can, I think that if you start from the idea that you have something important to say and add in the idea that people can appreciate truthful, vulnerable, authentic speech, then those two things will go a long way in helping you to sound compelling. I mean, that's maybe a word I would use to describe how I kind of want to sound as a hypnotist. I want to sound compelling. I want to speak for a couple hours and have someone be changed for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
But I can't sound compelling unless I also believed in what I was saying. So I think that putting everything in the right order means you have to start from speaking truthfully, authentically, and sincerely, and also recognizing that what you have to say matters and will make an impact. And more will come, more will come from that. It'll be out of order to do vocal exercises. It'll be out of order to wonder which microphone to purchase.
Mm.
Those things might come later. But to kind of go back to the foundations, um, you know, even whether you have a softer voice or a louder voice or a higher pitched voice or a lower pitched voice, the
Mhm.
sincerity cuts through, the authenticity cuts through.
Okay, so I'm on the right direction because I could definitely
Yes,
think.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's my main focus. I definitely tried using the metronome. I've done the like I would speak for like a minute and then listen back and try to correct my s's or my
Yep.
ums or all that nonsense that comes out.
Mhm.
But I really want to enunciate and deliver a crystal clear message with heart from the other end.
You you're doing a good job. I mean, most people are their own worst enemies, so they criticize themselves. I can kind of see you do that, and I know I do it myself to myself sometimes, but because most people are their own worst enemies. But just sort of objectively from the outside, you sound like you know what you're doing. You sound like a radio broadcaster. You've got the tone, the clarity, the enunciation. So you might just be hard on yourself in this situation.
That's what my significant other says. She's always telling me
Now
that.
there's two. Now there's at least two people telling you your inner critic is wrong. And from the outside, you sound perfectly fine.
That if if I could get just one piece of advice for myself, I know you probably have to get going, but is there anything I can do to eliminate this critic that I use to protect myself that I don't no longer need to be protected?
It's a huge topic. Um, Off the top of my head, one idea to wrap your head around is what you just said, which is you don't have to protect yourself by anticipating that someone else is going to yell at you. So the inner critic, you are right, tends to kind of be internalized. So that the idea is if you criticize yourself first and stop yourself from, quote, doing something stupid, you won't get yelled at by a parent. You won't get punished by a teacher. But as you've correctly identified, because today you're an adult, no one's going to yell at you. So one thing I said at the very start is because you're an adult, your morality matters. If you don't think you deserve to be yelled at, if you like, for example, let's say there's a technical problem and your mind automatically goes to, oh, I'm messing it up, I'm wasting his time. You know,
Yeah. Mm.
I can tell you, I was not thinking that. I've been on enough podcasts, I've hosted enough episodes of my own podcast to know that shit happens. And, shit does happen. which
Yes.
means no one's expecting perfection. And if you also stop expecting perfection, there's no one who's going to expect perfection. We just kind of roll with the punches as we did earlier.
Hmm.
And, so often it's the unnecessary suffering that we can dispense of with no consequence. And a very harsh inner critic, in my opinion, causes unnecessary suffering. And, you know, through whichever means, when you ignore it, when you forget about it, good things will happen and nothing bad will happen because, as you said, the danger's over. No one's going to yell at you.
I love this. This is really helpful. I would just like to share with you how that inner critic sounds, just so
Yeah.
I'm not just so I know I'm not crazy and that, or I am that, Greg, you need to stop. But usually it goes like this. For this specific example,
Mhm.
you got on early. I should have had my. This was. I'm yelling at myself internally, like
Mhm.
within split
Yeah.
seconds. Greg, what the fuck
Yeah.
is wrong with you? You should have had your shit up here, ready to
Yeah.
go, on time, ready, and
Mhm.
now you have created a pattern,
Yeah.
so people are
Yeah.
going to know that you are a piece. You're lazy. You don't give a fuck. You can't get on the mic. You can't preach what you're telling them if you're not doing the thing you're supposed to be doing. And it's like,
Got
I just want to punch myself in the face.
And so that tells me that when you were young, someone spoke to you like that. Now, my question
Every
for you is,
fucking day.
great. My question for you is, would you speak to either your stepdaughter or your son like that when they can understand your words? Would you ever speak to them like that?
I'll be honest, I did in the beginning when I first took them under my wing. I was in
Mhm.
the army for 5.5 years, and
Yeah.
going from living in isolation to different states to settling down and
Mhm.
buying a house for them, I didn't know how to be a parent. And what I
Yeah.
did know how to be was a sergeant. And
Yeah.
the way I was talking to her and her other son that is now living with the stepfather,
Mhm.
that it was insane. And I thought it was normal. And I thought, why don't you get it? And I had to get a wake up call on my life. And I'm like, oh my God, I just did the very thing that my dad was doing to me. And now I'm going to spend every day of my life making it up to my stepdaughter.
Yeah. And that realization that you can't pass on former trauma, past trauma to the next
I
generation
won't.
is how you are making it up to her. Because the easy default is to do to the next generation what was done to you. The harder thing to do is to be a bulwark between past and future, refuse to let the shit get through, and pass on the good stuff. So, what I have to say about the inner critic is that in your head, you do have the inner critic, which you now refuse to voice out loud as criticism, harsh criticism to your children. But you also have the inner voices of kindness, which you do voice out loud to your
Yes.
children.
Every moment I
And
can.
and it's the same inner voice of kindness that's going to help you too. The things you say to your children are not just for your children. The things you say to your children are good ideas, good, sound ways of operating in the world that are good for you, just like they're good for them. Because the things we teach children are not supposed to be just until they're 18. The things we teach children are supposed to be for when they're 30 and 40 and 50 and 70 years old. So they're also good enough for you at your age. Does does that help?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm tearing up a little bit because I I needed that. Like nobody could
Yeah.
articulate what I needed, and thank God like we've had this show because I really really needed that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to include that bit in the episode that airs. I have no objection to any of this being included because that's why I showed up. The things I'm saying to individuals that they have to pay me money for would benefit so many people around the world. And, again, that's why I'm here. It's to help to spread good ideas, and good ideas have helped me. Good ideas are helping you. Good ideas will help your children. Good ideas will help all of your listeners. Good ideas will also help those who listen to people who listen to you. There's a ripple effect.
Yes.
So I'm doing my part. Like, there are only so many ways I can make the world a better place. And I think one of the best ways I can make the world a better place is by speaking the good ideas I speak to individuals, but more broadly to other people. So I really am glad that you had me on.
I saw at the moment, like, I'm very, very intuitive. Like, I've done nothing but research body language, and I'm very familiar with psychology. We could have went ham on so many things, and I'm like, Greg, you got to compose yourself. But
If you want me back for another episode in the future, just
yes,
let me know.
yes, I strongly want to make another one, get that set up as soon as we can, because you have a lot of insight that the world, what you know is foundational understanding of the brain that goes unnoticed, because that is what needs to be
Yep.
practiced and understood, because it
Yep.
applies to everything that's happening.
If someone else were kind of in the public sphere saying everything I say, my work is done. But it's because I'm not hearing enough people say what I'm saying. That's why I've got to step up and be the person to say these things.
To, to
Right?
yes,
That's
fuck
the
yeah,
leadership I was talking about earlier.
yes,
When there's a vacuum of truth or good ideas or morality or whatever else, if you don't like the vacuum, you've got to step up if when no one else is doing it.
yes. I'm gonna do it with my humor, because I know I can really bring light through my witty, dark, abnormal side
Well,
comments.
and humor is one of the mature defense mechanisms. It's like, you don't want to repress the dark stuff. You don't
Mm-mm,
want to deny the dark stuff.
mm-mm.
Humor's one of the best ways to deal with the dark side of life.
God, we can have a whole episode about my dark side and my thoughts about. We won't go into that. Like, I could.
It's up to you. I'd be happy. As you can tell, I don't need much preparation to speak about a lot of different topics. So just tell me when,
Okay.
and I'll you know probably be at my office next time, so we don't have to deal with condo stuff. But yeah, I would be very happy to return for another episode.
Beautiful. I will chop this up, just the silly parts. I want to try to incorporate what we just spoke, because that's what the audience needs to hear. They really need to hear that authentic conversation, and that's what I was trying to illustrate. It was a little rough because I feel like you're not used to conversations like this. I wanted to illustrate a friend to friend conversation, me having your
Yeah,
back and you having my back, and
yeah.
it's
Uh,
really hard.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I've been working from home largely for the past 2.5 years in literally this setup. So when my clients pay me to hypnotize them over the internet, I'm standing right here talking into this microphone with my client in front of. So I probably sounded like a professional talking to a client in a way,
Yes,
because that's basically where in my office it's the same kind of deal. Um, but yeah, the bit at the end, especially, I thought was really good.
definitely. I will share and give you a copy of everything. I'll send it to you. If you can do me a solid and share, and also if you could, it would really help if you leave an Apple Podcast review. Just it'll just
Okay,
yeah.
do I need like an iPhone to
Uh,
leave an Apple?
no, you don't need to use an iPhone. You can
Okay,
just type it in
okay,
Google.
okay, good.
Awesome. That would really mean a lot to me.
Awesome. We'll be in touch.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care too.